Because Ukraine has launched a significant drone strike on a major heat and power station in the Moscow region. According to Governor Andrei Vorovok, multiple drones hit the Shatura power station, about 120 kilometers east of Kremlin. Unverified telegram videos showed loud explosions followed by balls of fire rising into the night sky. Russian officials say several drones were intercepted by air defense systems, but others crashed directly onto the facility, igniting a huge fire. 3 transformers, each the size of a small apartment, caught fire and were badly damaged. Authorities say the blaze is now under control. With temperatures near freezing, backup power has been activated and mobile heating units deployed. However, at least one local resident reported having no heating. The incident comes as Russia continues targeting Ukraine's own energy infrastructure, and tonight's strike marks an escalation in the energy war between the two countries. Mohammed Osman, who is an international relations expert, is joining us live from Cairo. I welcome you, Mr. Osman, for joining us here on NewsX World. And now this is continuing between Russia and Ukraine, and even as Russia claims that it has intercepted 71 drone strikes and missiles, there still has been significant damage to its Shatura power plant there. How do you see this proceeding from here on?
Thank you for having me, Kriti. Greetings to you and to your audience. It seems that the energy war, as you said, between Russia and Ukraine is escalating. Russia has been gradually degrading the Ukrainian energy infrastructure over the past few weeks using missile strikes and drone strikes on the energy infrastructure, on power stations, on gas refineries. And Ukraine is trying to do the same with Russia, with the purpose of hampering Russia's oil production and hampering its ability to export oil, which is the main driver of its of income in its economy, and also to try to make winter as hard as it can be on the Russians. But of course, there is no comparison. The damage Ukraine is doing to Russia's energy infrastructure is minimal in comparison to the massive damage that has been inflicted by the Russian military on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. So Ukraine is acting out of desperation at this point. And when we look at the situation in the field, Russia basically all but capturing Pokrovsk at this moment in the Donbass, capturing Kupiansk and Kharkiv. Leningrad is under siege. The Russians are advancing in cities like Seversk and Liman and Konstantinivka, and even Mariupol in Zaporozhye. So it seems that the Ukrainian army is gradually collapsing on the Donbass and Zaporozhye front lines, which is a very huge red flag at this point. And this maybe prompted the United States to push forward its peace plan at the moment to save whatever can be saved at this point, because Ukraine is in a very dire situation, and the Europeans they can talk the talk, but they cannot walk the walk. They have pledged so much support for Ukraine, yet they in 2025, European and American financial and military support to Ukraine decreased by about 46%. So it doesn't seem that actions on the ground reflect what their pledges, the pledges they have reiterated.
So how much more fire do you think the Ukrainian military and army has left in it before it finally agrees to a peace plan or negotiations that are being fostered by United States?
It all depends on the European and the American ability to deliver more aid to the Ukrainian military, which seems to be backing down. Of course, I'm not a military expert, but I've seen reports saying that this situation, if the war goes on under the current circumstances for less than a year, then the Ukrainian army would actually collapse. And President Trump himself said that if the Ukrainians do not accept the current deal, they will have to accept an even worse deal somewhere down the line. So, and I think that this makes perfect sense what the Americans are saying. They are being completely realistic about the situation on the ground. All of these ideas and fallacies about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia have all but evaporated. Everyone, even in those European capitals, know right now that the idea of defeating and humbling Russia is something that is completely unattainable and unrealistic, and that the solution to the Ukraine crisis, the interests of Russia have to be taken into account, including the root causes of the war.
All right. Requested to now stay on with us, Osman. We have some more information to give our viewers. This one from the G20 summit. Now, at a press conference during the G20 in Johannesburg, French President Emmanuel Macron stood by his chief of staff, asserting that he still had his full confidence despite the controversy surrounding his remarks earlier this week. The comments, which sparked criticism, were, according to Macron, taken out of context. The remarks had drawn accusations of warmongering, particularly after the French general warned that France must be prepared to lose its children in the face of the ongoing war in Ukraine. First, listen into that statement, and then I'll bring back my guest into the discussion.
Je ne fais pas de commentaire. Il n'y a qu'un chef des armées en France, c'est le président de la République. Il y a ensuite un lien et un commandement qui se fait avec le chef d'état-major des armées, qui a toute ma confiance et qui a tenu un discours qui était beaucoup plus élaboré que la phrase qu'on en a sortie. Je vois assez bien de quoi il peut s'agir, sortir une phrase et la sortir de son contexte pour faire peur. Je vois aussi les surréactions qu'il y a pu avoir. La ministre des Armées, comme le chef d'état-major des armées lui-même, ont pu, je crois, ces derniers jours, donner toute clarté. Et pour tous les gens qui veulent sincèrement écouter ce qu'ils ont dit, remettre les choses dans leur contexte.
And Macron also addressed the US-backed ceasefire proposal, calling it a positive initiative for peace. However, he emphasized that the primary concerns were Ukrainian sovereignty and European security. While the US had made strides in pushing for a ceasefire, Macron insisted that both Ukraine and Europe must be central to any negotiations. This is what the French president has stated. Let's go back to Osman, who continues to stay with us.
I think it's very good that the US proposed something to go to a ceasefire and peace, and we have to commend these efforts. But at the same time, as what is at stake is obviously Ukrainian sovereignty and European security. It's normal to have both the Ukrainians and the Europeans on the table to finalize this plan. So this is exactly what we will do tomorrow and the days after in order to make a common plan. Now, we just have one problem, and our problem is not the US on this negotiation on this point. Our unique problem, all of us, is Russia, which started this war. We refused to take the ceasefire proposals in February, March, July, August, etc., and didn't provide any guidance if they are okay just to have a ceasefire now.
All right, after that statement from Macron, Osman, I want to take your reactions as to the stance that France is taking on the war and the US peace plan.
Well, Europe in general, and of course France is no exception, they are really upset about being sidelined and ignored. The Europeans have become a marginal actor in the international sphere. They are no longer a great power anymore. They are very upset that the Americans and the Russians and even the Chinese are talking about this and are attempting to find a solution or even dividing the influence among one another in the world. And the Europeans are being left out of the conversation. They are not on the big boys table anymore. And of course, this enrages the Europeans. And in order to deliver the message that they are an active and preeminent global power, they make statements like what the French military chief of staff said. Basically, France and many other European countries, they are undertaking what we can call a campaign of fear-mongering among the population to mobilize them and convince them that they have to endure harsh economic conditions or even harsher economic conditions to support Ukraine militarily and economically and help it persevere against the Russian invasion. And of course, for the European populace to buy into this narrative, they have to be convinced that there's an impeding Russian threat, that Russia might actually attack NATO and Central and Western Europe, which is ludicrous, as you very well know, Kriti. Russia does not even have the capacity to occupy all of Ukraine. So basically, these are very, very severe exaggerations of the Russian threat and even of Russian capabilities. And Russia itself is not interested in starting a third world war, because fighting NATO means basically a decision of collective suicide, because it will be mutually nuclear annihilation. So no one will willingly pursue such a course of action. Yet the Europeans are trying. Maybe the French chief of staff went too far in his statements, and Macron is trying to do damage containment. However, the real problem with the Europeans is that they were not consulted in the 28-point plan proposed by President Trump. The plan, the Russians were consulted, even the Ukrainians were consulted, yet the Europeans were left out. And now they seek to make their own amendments to this plan so that it, moving forward, so that it can accommodate their interests more. But I do not see Russia or even the United States being very accommodating of any European requests.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that opinion of yours with us here on NewsX World, but I request you to stay on with us. We have some news now from